Hi, I'm Ryan Szymanski, curator for Battleship New Jersey Museum and Memorial. And today, we've got a really exciting video for you. So, we found some plans from the 1980s, before the ship was reactivated, about some of the various proposals that were made. Now, you guys have seen, we've got a model of the ship with the flight deck on the fantail. It's called the Phase 2 conversion. And you go online and you look, and there's like artists' renditions of what that would look like. And there's even a handful of models. And there's a ton of models and drawings out there that are fairly contemporary. They've been made in recent years by enthusiasts like myself. They're like, this is how I would update the Iowas, or this is how they were looking at updating the Iowas back in the 80s. And it's all really guesswork, because those documents that were allegedly used for this alleged update didn't exist. Well, they did exist, but nobody had access to them. We don't know much about this collection yet. We just found it. I'm so excited to show it to you that we haven't even waited until Monday for my coworker to get here so we can log on and see if any of this stuff is in our digital database. But just going through this box, we've got a couple of things to show off. So first, we have a stack of plans for New Jersey when she's being reactivated in 1981, when they're doing the planning. And this seems to be, Reagan has taken office, he's going to give us funding, give us 6 options for reactivating the battleship. So the base drawing here is the ship in her Vietnam configuration. It's still got the empty 40mm gun tubs around the aft funnel. It's not the 80s configuration yet. And we've got a series of options in here, sketch A, B, C, so on and so forth, that essentially go from most expensive, most changes, down to less expensive, less changes. Well, they're not exactly in that order. But it's everything from removing all of the gun turrets and replacing the ship with vertical launch cells for Tomahawks, removing all the 5-inch guns and replacing them with vertical launch cells, and adding hangars or even full runways for helicopters and other vertical or short takeoff and landing aircraft. So the first set of documents we have is probably the earliest one here. It's a set of drawings, and then it's got penned into it just some details. So these are probably documents that were being used internally, passed around the office. This is probably the first set that was created, and it's got penned onto it various questions and answers, and notes of how many aircraft can this document hold, how much close-in weapon systems is it going to have. Fun question on this one: is it feasible to add Aegis to this? The answer, just penned in on the margin, no, all capital, exclamation mark. So, assuming this is what they're passing around the office, the next document we have is a little bit more formal. It's a bigger drawing. It's got the notes typed out. So this is probably your 1981 version of a PowerPoint slideshow. So maybe they would have taken this and put it on clear plastic and put it on a projection machine. Maybe they would have put them all up on a pin board or something, and then they're briefing an admiral or maybe President Reagan, who knows, about what the options are. And it's probably a way to narrow down, just from this rough deck view sketch, what they could potentially do. Do we want to remove turret 3 and add a full flight deck? If we remove certain 5-inch guns and replace them with Tomahawks, or remove all of them. And so there's a series of options in here. Interesting, these options do not match the ones on the first page, so there was probably some refinement going on in the office before this formal typed presentation was made. From here, we move on, and we've got some other stuff here. But most interestingly, we have a stack of blueprints. So they decided which of these options were worth looking into, and you've got the full range, like I said, from removing all the guns to put vertical launch cells on to removing none of the guns on and like bolting on the Tomahawks aftermarket. So expensive options to super cheap, and a couple of different scenarios. Is this ship going to be primarily for shore bombardment with missiles and guns, or is she going to be for amphibious landings with hangars, spaces for Marines to stay, flight decks for vertical takeoff aircraft? So once they've done that, then they're actually producing some more detailed drawings. And again, they're starting with the ship's Vietnam blueprints and just modifying it. And in some cases, they're modifying it by taping scale drawings of the aircraft onto the blueprint. So in addition to the loose blueprints, we also have some folders here. This one is labeled BB-61 to CB-61, carrier battleship. I guess they didn't know that CB was already used for Alaska-class cruisers. Flight and hangar configuration, 15 March 1981. So this is before New Jersey is taken in hand for modification. And it's, in some cases, just loose leaf drawings with penciled in information. Some cases, loose paper. And then here's a nice fold out that shows the ship with a bunch of aircraft in it. Now, interestingly, these aircraft silhouettes are good enough that you can tell what they are. So here on the flight deck, we've got a bunch of AV-8B Harriers, very common aircraft at this point in the 80s. It can do vertical takeoff and landings. The British are using it on their carriers / flight deck cruisers. The Americans are using it on their amphibious ships. So looks like they're going to use that as like the fighter bomber protection for this battleship in this version that retains the forward turrets but loses turret 3. Now, really interestingly, there is another aircraft depicted here that you can tell was never an aircraft, and it looks sort of like an S-3 Viking, which is the Navy's anti-submarine plane during this time period, but the wings and the engines are all wrong. It is a Grumman 698, which was a proposal that the Army asked for a vertical launch aircraft that could be used in the AWACS role, doing airborne early warning, electronic jamming, that sort of stuff. The sort of thing that the Prowler was doing during this time period, but vertical takeoff so it can be used on a ship like a battleship that only has half a flight deck on it. One of these depictions has one with a radar dome on it, like a Hawkeye, and the other ones do not show that, so maybe they're being used as bombers or straight jammers or something like that. Uses the same turbofan engines as the S-3 Viking and my beloved A-10 Warthog. So the standard 80s tech, just those on this aircraft, it would have been able to tilt. So apparently when they were designing this, the Navy was seriously looking into adding those as a vertical takeoff and landing capable plane to give that capability to ships other than their full flight deck supercarriers. So we've got this series of increasingly more detailed design sketches. Now we go from individual blueprints to these folders, and then all the way up to a book with a serious design study. And so they were really looking at the options that they had. And I want to take one brief look at one of the documents over here, and then just as a taste, a primer, and then this is going to be our top priority because this is the sort of stuff that researchers love, and it's not available anywhere else, and quite frankly, I'm ashamed that we've had it for all this time without being able to make it available. So we're going to work on scanning all of this, getting it online. We'll do future videos about it, about the cool stuff we found. So this is called the BB-61 Air Capable Feasibility Study. This one's from 18 February 1981, and it's listed as drawing A1. So it's probably the very first drawing in the series that they made, and it matches fairly closely the Alt 1 version of this drawing that was probably at a meeting. So obviously this was something that they thought was a good enough design that they wanted to keep moving with. Some of the cool features on here: the available hangar space when they remove turret 3 and build the fantail up an entire level. Gives us enough room for something like 25 of those Grumman 698s in the hangar with their wings folded, and another 9 deck parked on the flight deck with a 10th one in the takeoff position there on the little side ramp. Some other cool features: the drawings here are good enough that you can see that the 5 Sea Whizzes that they have on here are not the phalanx that the Battleship got. They're British goalkeepers, the 30mm Sea Whiz system. So that's interesting to see that they want Sea Whiz, but they don't go with what they have in these initial drawings. Interestingly, they also have Sea Sparrow launchers on here. This drawing doesn't show any of the fire control systems for either the Battleship or those Sea Sparrows, but some of those other drawings do. This one just isn't all that detailed. Now, interestingly, they never add Sea Sparrow to this class because they find that the overpressure from the 60-inch guns firing damages them in the launchers, so they don't work. And sure enough, right outside the captain's cabin, they have one on each side of the ship where there used to be a 40mm gun, and that is right there where turret 2 turns for over-the-shoulder shoots. They do have one aft of funnel 2 back on the fantail, basically where the aft fire control tower is now, which, since they've removed turret 3, that would still work. This drawing does not show any Harpoon anti-ship missiles, but it does show 160 vertical launch tubes. And what they did is they removed all the 5-inch guns, kept the handling rooms, and then built the handling rooms up an extra 2 stories above where they were. Tomahawk cruise missiles are 3 stories tall. The vertical launch cells for them are 3 stories tall. And they don't want to cut through the 1.5 inch thick main deck that we're standing on, and they obviously don't want to vent that down into the hull. It's fine for a ship where you're building it from the ground up, like a Ticonderoga or an Arleigh Burke, but a ship where you're adding these aftermarket, that's just not going to work. So they built the deck house up, and the missiles were going to be entirely above the main deck in these vertical cells that are where the 5-inch guns are. And that is something that shows up in most of the drawings here. So it's interesting to see that they completely go away from that in the final ship. Now, most importantly, these studies are all labeled BB61 for the class of ship, but the drawing clearly shows New Jersey's T-shaped superstructure that she gets in Vietnam. So either they are planning this for New Jersey specifically, which makes sense, she's the one they've chosen to reactivate, or at this time they're planning on putting that style superstructure on all of the Iowas for their electronic countermeasures, and they haven't developed the more aerodynamic one that shows up on the other 3 Iowas when they're reactivated later in the 80s. Anyway, this is one of the coolest finds that we've found in our collection. Again, this video is just a primer to tell you we found it. We're going to be digitizing this and putting more content out about it in the very near future. So stay tuned over the next couple of months as we find the time to work through this collection and dig in and try and do some research on this. If you have any information about this reactivation program, let us know in the comment section down below, and we'll get back to you and see if we can line everything up with when these drawings are made and that sort of stuff. Otherwise, hang out and we'll get these out to the public as quickly as possible. Battleship New Jersey receives operating support from the New Jersey Department of State, also from a number of other businesses and private individuals like yourselves. Your support is what allows us to hire more staff and spend the time going through our collection to find cool stuff like this. You can also support us at the donation link in the description below, or by liking, sharing, and subscribing so more people find about the museum, our channel, and the cool research we get to do. Thanks for watching.